as long as we keep, for me, like as long as I keep my focus on how do I want to feel in my life, what I'm finding is as I'm making changes and adjusting, those core feelings will change too.
Okay, ladies, this is a doozy, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Welcome back to episode 297. So if you're new to the community, you know who I am, maybe or maybe not. I'm Heather Chauvin, founder of Mamas in Control, and I invite you to binge on the previous podcast, learn more about me and my story and my mission to help women feel more in control of their lives, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, which of course will manifest into how you show up as a mother, if you have a career, your passions, your desires, your relationships, money, time, and energy. And today I wanted to share a very special interview with you. This is you'll hear her name, Sarah Cruz. She's a mother of 5. She is a dog lover. She is a school secretary, and she's an everyday woman with a passion for writing, which you would never know hearing her story. And so Sarah has actually, she is in sobriety. She's a recovering alcoholic. And you would never know that meeting her. Everyone has a story. And in the past few months, you've heard me, you may have seen some podcasts where I'm interviewing kind of just simple human beings, right? These are women who have come into my world, whether they've worked with me or have been friends, colleagues, things like that. And not everyone needs to be a New York Times bestseller. Not everyone needs to own a business. Not everyone needs to have a message or a platform. So I'm choosing just to support these women in helping them get their message out, because I believe we all have a story that needs to be told. And whether you are organizing a coffee date in your own living room, I think we need to take back control and create community and connection in our lives as women. And too often nowadays, when you go online, it's like, start your mission, make $1 million in 2 hours, and all of these ridiculous things that we're being taught and shoved down our throat. But at the essence of it, we're craving connection as women. We're craving community. We're craving to be heard. We're craving to tell our stories. We're craving to make an impact in the world. And you do not need to be, you don't have to have a podcast to do that. You don't have to have a book to do that. I mean, if those are desires of yours, definitely lean towards that. But don't wait to get your message out to the world because of that. I started this simply just teaching my son how to breathe with like an app. And then I invited his friends into my living room when he was 4 years old. And that's how all of this started. So I invite you and encourage you just to tell your story to one person and share. And if it scares the crap out of you and you want to share it with more people, then invite a few friends into your house and just engage in these uncomfortable stories that we need to start talking more about. So I'm excited to dive in and for you to listen to Sarah's story and to hear it and to dive into it and to give feedback. Also, if you are inspired by Sarah's story and you want to reach out to her personally, I invite you to email my team at support@heatherchauvin.com. And in the subject line, just put, "This is for Sarah." And I will forward it to her personally. So just so that she knows, like, words of affirmation, and, however you were impacted by her story, I think it would be really helpful for her to hear. So just send that to our team and we will directly forward it to Sarah. That's it. At the end, I'm going to be talking about the time and energy intensive that I have created for you guys. It is less time intensive than mastery, and it has massive, massive transformation in your life. So if you want to learn more about that now, then head on over to Heather Chauvin. So my name, last name spelt CHAUVIN.com /intensive. You'll see a 7-minute video there and an application Once you fill out the application, I will personally be in touch via email. And if I feel like you're a good fit or I'll be answering your questions, I'll send you the link to register. And our next one is November 9th, but we have 3 dates available. So check that out at heatherchauvin.com/intensive. All right, let's dive into Sarah's story.
And there are always things that are coming up. And as long as we keep, for me, like as long as I keep my focus on how do I want to feel in my life, what I'm finding is as I'm making changes and adjusting, those core feelings will change too. Like those core desired feelings and what you want in your life, they can evolve and change as you evolve and change. And it's such a neat process to see how that all comes up, but then to be given like the energetic time management skills to be able to adapt to those changes and build your daily life and your weekly life and your monthly life and your goals to reflect the new core desired feelings that might come up in the process.
Brilliant. So I already hit record. So we started recording.
Yeah.
Every word of wisdom, like every time you open your mouth, I'm like, geez, I just need to like transcribe everything you say and turn it into my book.
Oh my God, you're too funny.
This is so funny. It's not funny. You're like poetic and brilliant. And awesome.
You're so sweet because I always feel like clumsy with my words and awkward.
Isn't it funny?
It's a good confidence boost. I appreciate that.
And isn't it funny what we think about ourselves and how the world sees us? 2 different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Let's dive into that. Things. Let's just dive in there. I'll do an introduction. I'll go back and do an introduction and then integrate into this. So we're just having a conversation, but let's dive into that. How the world sees us and how we see ourselves, and a little bit about your journey through motherhood, because you have a very unique motherhood situation.
Yes, that I do.
Tribe, as you family.
Yes, my tribe, my small army.
So tell us about your tribe.
Okay, so I am the mom of, I have 5 children right now. They are all teenagers. So my oldest actually just turned 20. So I have been a mom a long time. I became pregnant when I was in college. That child's father and I were engaged at that time, but it was not the right thing. Like, we were engaged prior to getting pregnant, and I became basically a runaway pregnant bride where I called off a wedding. My poor mother, I called off a wedding 2 weeks before the wedding. And then I was like, oh, and by the way, I'm pregnant and I'm moving home.
My gosh.
Yeah. So she's a trooper. But, so I had my firstborn, at a little girl just after I turned 23. And I credit that child with saving my life, because prior to having her, I had spent all of my late teen years and early 20s dealing with unaddressed trauma and loss and abandonment, and I was incredibly self-destructive. So I had this perfect little child born to me, and I was so head over heels in love with her. Like, I can still remember it. Like, it just fills my heart. And I so loved being this baby's mom. And I felt so lucky. And that completely turned my life around. And I finished college after I had her. And I traveled all over with her. It was just so much fun. Like, it was just my baby and me. And traveled lots of places. I worked as a paralegal in a law firm, and I had her in daycare just like right down the road. And I probably idolized that time, or idealized that time a little too much, but I absolutely loved that time. It was so special in my life. When she was 2, I met my husband, and we had a long distance relationship, and then eloped after 5 months of knowing each other, which is a crazy story. He is one, again, my poor mother.
I'm like, no wonder why I love you. No wonder why we get along so well.
Yes, I am a jumper. Like, I jump into life and things, and, kind of, yeah, it has served me well the great majority of the time, especially with big decisions. So my husband and I have now been married 18 years, and he is my world. Like, I so adore this man, and we've had good years and bad years, but it's such a foundation of my life. So he's my best friend. And I, when people ask me, like, do you have any advice about marriage? The only advice I can truly give people is marry someone who makes you a better person, or who brings out the best in you, and who you want to be your best for. And because it makes all the difference. I mean, when you wake up and you love the person, and you want to be the best for them, and they're doing the same for you. And we had very, very different lifestyles growing up, and we had very different parenting ideas coming into it. And we had to learn, to meet in the middle and give and take. And fortunately, we're both flexible enough people where that was it was a learning process, but it was good, and we grew closer together. So we were married, and he adopted my oldest daughter, and then we had our first son about a year or so after we got married, and he is 4 years younger than our oldest daughter. And then I had a boy and a girl, and it was just so beautiful, and we were very happy, and we were very poor. I stayed home with the kids, and like a couple of years we worked a nighttime paper route together, and Cliff, my husband, worked so hard for us, and we lived in a little tiny bungalow. And I know I'm a rose-colored glass, half glass full girl, but this was it was such a beautiful time in my life, and I really, really value it. But it was a very simple time. Mm-hmm. And so now looking back at that, like, I think, oh, that was such a key. Like, it was such, I set up my days where I just enjoyed being and doing what I was doing. It didn't matter about money. It didn't matter about things. I was so present at that point, at those points in my life, that those were such happy years. So we had moved around some for my husband's job, and one day I was sitting on the couch, and I was folding laundry, and I was watching my 2 children. They were at the coffee table, and they were coloring. And I so clearly could see, like, this blurry energy. This sounds so crazy. Like this blurry light energy field.
I love crazy.
I know you do. That's why I can share it with you.
I know. And my people, the community loves crazy. We need to tell them about your energy story at the retreat after the spin.
Oh, that's such a good one. That's such a good one. So
we'll tell them.
We'll tell them. We can't forget that one. So I'm watching these 2 children, and there's like this blurry light energy field just to the right of them. Mm-hmm. And I knew we need to have a third child. Like, that was and I get chills saying this because it was actually her birthday yesterday. That was my third child. And so Cliff came home that night, and I said, we need to have another baby. We're not complete. And he said, okay. And honestly, that month we were pregnant. So then we had she was a girl. We had our third baby. Our oldest was 7, and then our next oldest was 3, and she was born. And the first few years of her life were very busy. We did a big relocation move back by my family, and my husband switched career industries, so he was out of state a lot. Like that first year she was born. But as she got a little older, he and I both thought, our family's not complete yet still. And we were kind of at the point where we knew we couldn't have more children of our own. My pregnancies all went well, but I had a number of miscarriages in between my first and my second, and I always have wanted to adopt children. Like when I was in school, I would write papers on, when I grow up, I'm going to be single. Because I'm not going to let any man take my money, and I'm going to be an attorney, and I'm going to adopt a little girl from China. Like that was my life plan. And so I said, I really want to adopt children. And I really felt strongly that we needed to adopt boys, because my husband grew up as the only boy in like a huge family of girls, and my brother's the youngest, and he's the only boy in this big family of girls. And I really, really wanted Atticus to have siblings, boys, brothers. And I just, again, it wasn't like, if anyone would have looked at us, it didn't look like the right time. Adoption's expensive. And we had 3 little ones, and I was homeschooling, and we had our hands full. But yet I shared this with my husband, and he's like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. And I did a ton of research on it. And we decided we wanted to adopt from Haiti. It's a country, it's on the other, it's in the West Indies, so the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. It's on the same island as the Dominican Republic, so it's just on that other side. It's a 90-minute flight out of Miami. And the adoptions are open down there, meaning you can travel to and from orphanages. It is not done through a government agency, so you can hire an attorney and work directly with orphanages down there. And at the time we started, that process was 7 to 10 months roughly to get children home. So it just seemed like this dream process. So we did research on agencies, and right away found an agency in the state that we could get our home study through, and then an attorney out of Florida who we could work with, and then an orphanage right in Port-au-Prince. So you fly in, easy out. The woman who ran the orphanage, she was Haitian, and she has a very big heart and wanted to make sure that these kids who didn't have like good backgrounds could go somewhere. She wasn't a church ministry. She was just like, that was strictly what she did. She was a nurse. And so it all seemed so good to us. We found 2 beautiful little boys to adopt. So we started that process, and it took 31 months and 33 months to get them home. Wow. It was such a trial. Like any possible thing that could go wrong did go wrong. and that was it was a huge test of faith, and it was a huge learning lesson, and that really good things can take a really long time, and you have to trust the process. And when you are at your breaking point and you can't trust the process necessarily, you just kind of have to hunker down and just keep pushing forward and go through.
I want to ask you a question about that. So I mean, every time we chat, I'm like, your life story is like, you want to laugh and cry and be like, oh my gosh, like, and we could literally talk about it for hours and hours and hours. Cause I remember you attended one of the retreats I did, and like, tell me, like, how did you bring them home? And you're telling me these stories, and like, you have like, your face is lit up. And it's so interesting because, like you were saying before, you wear these rosy colored glasses, and it's a beautiful energy of, yeah, shit's going to happen. Right. Like it brings you to your knees. And like you said, you have to persevere and trust the process and all of that. So I just wanted to bring that up because it's really, every time you're telling me a story about this, you're like, these were the trials and the triumphs, but it's, I don't know if this is just like your spirit or something. There's like this magic of like, you just keep going. That's the only way to do it.
It is the only way to do it. And I never heard the word manifestation until like, maybe in the past year or two. Just, I think now, like the whole woo culture that's coming forth, and like what we try to hope for and what we try to do, like how we manifest things, and so I think what I've always had a spirit of is I've never wanted to live life trying not to fail. I just want to live life focused on succeeding and moving forward. Because I think there's a big difference in living a fear-based life and living, I don't know if positive-based life is the other word, but living,
I think it's like faith and trust, because like the opposite of fear is love, they say. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like trusting the process.
Yes, I think that is very much it. And I'm not a Pollyanna too, in the sense that I think everything's going to work out and be unicorns and rainbows all the time. I had severely traumatic events in my childhood. I lost a beloved parent right in front of me in an incredibly traumatic way when I was 16. So, I was a runaway bride. I was a single mom. Like, I know that life doesn't always look like, and this goes back to like how others look at us sometimes, or how we feel like people look at us. Many times I felt like, okay, I'm kind of a failure here because I'm a single mom, or, I'm not getting my degree in a certain amount of time, or my life doesn't look like A, B, or C. We don't have a big fancy house, but that's not really what matters in this world. And I think I always knew that. And I was always comfortable because I had no choice but to live in a way knowing that, one, this could all be taken away from us tomorrow. But two, there's no guarantee that it's going to look the way you think it's going to look. But you just have to try. Like, I'm still just going to trust that it's all going to turn out, and, we're going to land on our feet, and it's going to be good in the way that the universe means for it to be good.
Right. I almost like 100% guarantee you it will not look the way you want it to.
Yes. It never looks the way you want it to. And so, that's something I'm always working on releasing, letting it go. Like, when you don't have those expectations of what perfection should look like, or these things should look like, I think you can enjoy the process, and then you can enjoy what you have so much more.
Right. So you brought the boys home.
Yeah, we brought the boys home.
Yeah, I was going to say it was a traumatic experience.
Oh my gosh, that was so insane. So so the two little boys we adopted are biologically related, but they are not siblings. So they had two separate files because of that. And they went through the process with two separate, and when I say files, I mean legal files and adoption files with the court. It wasn't a sibling process. It was it was just like basically two independent kids, but they did everything together. So, and I mean, I think we were in process longer than an elephant is pregnant. And so it's a big thing in like international adoption. Like you compare your gestation process to like, first you're a human and we thought, oh, it'd be just like a human pregnancy. And then we moved to like, okay, it's not that. Well, now we're like a zebra and then we become a giraffe and now we're like an elephant on two babies and we don't have any. So that just always made me laugh. But we were getting close, and we just constantly hit roadblocks. And then we got a call from the orphanage director, and she said, I have good news and I have bad news. You can come and get boy A, but because he is ready and he has a visa, I'm holding his visa, but you cannot get boy B because the U.S. Embassy lost his file, and I have to go back to the beginning with him. Mm. And our boys had been in care together from infancy. They've never been apart, and we were devastated. I mean, I was literally sick over this. And so I asked Mary France, like, how long is this going to be? Because we've just been in process 31 months. And she said, I think I can get it through in 6 because so much is done. It's just a matter of getting photocopies and that done, which it's Haiti. It's beyond third world. It doesn't operate the way that we operate here. Right. So we talked about it, and we just said, well, we have to go get our one son who's ready, because there was no guarantee. We knew there was no guarantee they would lose his file the next day. Mm-hmm. So my husband flew down to get our son, picked him up, brought him back. They flew into Miami that night, spent the night in Miami, flew up to the Midwest where we are, and it was just so joyous. Like, we had one home. It was like such a victory. And yet I was so devastated and mourning the fact that we didn't have our other son. And I had been to Haiti. I held these babies. I diapered them. I gave them bottles, and then they came home right before they turned 5. So they came home much bigger. Mm-hmm. So we were just devastated, and we told the agency, please don't call us until boy B is ready. Like, I can't go through the ups and downs of the paperwork and knowing where the file is. Like, I don't want to micromanage this or know anything. Just let us know when you're close. Right. And so she said, okay, hopefully by Christmas. I'm going to try so hard for the holidays. We got our first son home in July. And we said, okay. And so we had the one little guy home, and it was exciting and exhilarating and exhausting, because adoption, there's a very dark side to adoption, which, especially older child adoption, which many, which is not talked about, but it's such a massive loss and grieving for the child who comes home. And so, the highs and the lows that he experienced. And I still, to this day, this child was the bravest person I know. Like, he, a complete stranger picked him up, took him somewhere, and he came here, and he just embraced everything in life. And he was just like, it was so awesome. It was just really neat to see him those first 6 weeks. And he picked up English at a crazy rate. So we had boy A home. 6 weeks later, we get a phone call, and it's from Haiti. And I thought, well, this is really strange. What is going on? And they said they found the lost file. We have issued the visa. Come and get your boy. Wow. And we were like, what? Are you kidding? And so, I mean, at this point too, we were completely like out of funds. But you scrape the money together. My husband flies down to Miami. Before he even gets in Miami, we get a phone call. Oh, they found a mistake. They rescinded the visa. What? So he spent a few days down there. ended up coming back. Before he came back, I had like a fax of the visa in my hand. So when this poor guy goes back down, gets into Haiti in the morning, gets into a car accident. His taxi gets into a car accident on the way to the orphanage to get this child. I mean, talk about feeling like the whole universe is against you.
Yeah.
Finally makes it to the orphanage, gets our little guy, and gets to the airport, makes that plane by the skin of his teeth. And then, almost 6 weeks to the day after we brought our first Haitian son home, we brought our second one home. And so that was that whole journey.
Was it like,
and that's how we became a family of 5.
Yeah. And what was it like when they seen each other again?
So that was so interesting. My boy, can I say their names?
You can if you want. Yeah.
Or do you okay.
No, you can. It's up to you.
I'm getting confused now. Okay, so I'm just going to say first. Our first son came home, and he was strong and loud and robust, and had this huge. I mean, he still to this day has like the deepest voice and the deepest belly laugh, and like so joyous about everything. And he exhausted us because he was up at like 5 a.m. and wanted to go outside and play. And like, we literally had to like lure him into the house with food to get him to come in at the end of the day. When our second son came home, he came off the plane completely shut down. Like there was nothing to him. He was very, very sick. First of all, he had just gotten over measles, and he was barely cleared to fly in a plane. So he was covered in measles scars. And he was so adorable. He had little sunglasses on, but he had them on upside down. It was so precious. And he was so much smaller than our first son. And you could count his ribs. He had a huge distended belly. His hair was falling out of his head. He looked terrible. And he didn't talk. He didn't even like look at Miles, our first son, and recognize him. And so we thought, well, this is great because our first son will tell him in Creole, like, oh, this is your new family and they're going to love you and it's good food and they're so nice and like, we're okay. Like we thought he'd reassure him. So we're kind of like gesturing to him to talk to, his brother. And he just spits out like 3 sentences in English. Like we didn't even know he could speak that much English. And he was like, "Hi, buddy, how are you?" So we were like, "Well, this didn't go exactly how we thought to go." So,
not as planned.
Again, not planned. So that was such a different experience because when our first son came home, we went everywhere and did everything, and he just soaked it all in. Our second son came home, and it was like nursing a baby. I nicknamed him my puddle and this was so sad. He would just like noodle out in my arms and drool. He would just dissociate. And then he'd get up and he'd play and get a little rambunctious and kind of get into it for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then he'd come over and just lay on my lap for 2 hours. And so I did very little those first weeks with him. And eventually he came out of his shell. Now when I look back at those pictures and I see how lost he was, like it's really hard. He was in so much pain. So much pain and trauma that was so eye-opening to us too, to realize like the depth of this, because agencies don't prepare you for that.
Yeah.
Other parents don't necessarily prepare you for that either, because it's so painful and it's so personal for each child. And our 2 boys, all of their grief and trauma manifested night and day differently. Like just so, even how they view Haiti is night and day different. Like our one son, he can't wait to go back and ask people their names and learn about everything. The second one who came home, what's Haiti? I've never heard of that. That's my mom, my dad, my toys, my bike. Don't touch it. Wow. So it's so fascinating to see that and to, you know, and to go through that. The first years that they were home were really rough because they had such severe PTSD. And then they had a very difficult time attaching because these poor kids came home never having had a primary attachment.
Yeah.
And then even their like minor attachments to people were very, very unhealthy. And they didn't know what a mom and dad were. They didn't, you know, like relationships were more to be like manipulated to get what you need. They were in survival mode all the time. And so, we spent hours and hours and hours. Like one time our therapist joked, they had a therapist move away and he's like, well, we have an office next door and I just thought we could like move in bunk beds and a bed for you. So that's how often we were there. And I'm like, oh, that's not even funny.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, now I can laugh about it. But like I learned so much about trauma and brain science and just so much about like resiliency when I think about my boys and all they have been through.
I find this interesting because the social worker in me, not even the social worker, because I think, you know, you go into certain professions because you love, right? It's these things that are inside of you. You and I have talked about our love of dogs and that's, we can talk about that too. But, like it's just a part of who you are. When I think about purpose, like I'm very connected to the idea of helping children. And, it is something that's deeply ingrained in me. And I can't get rid of that. That is just a part of who I am. So when I look at people and you think, okay, Sarah, why, obviously your husband's like, yeah, man, we're on board. Let's make it happen. Partnership. But it's like, if I said to you, like, what is it, do you think inside of you that makes that it is this like, I want to make a difference. I want to help people, or I want to like, what is that? So first talk about the dogs. And then, and then the part of you that you think this is, and how expressing that in the world kind of like allows you to fulfill your purpose, but also makes everything complete. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. So, a little about the dogs. I love dogs, and my passion, in life, one of them is I am, and I also say we, because this was a family decision too, to a very large extent, because we all have to pitch in. But we take in senior dogs who, senior dog rescue, because they have such a hard time finding homes. And so, right now in our house, we have 4 dogs. They're all little, so they're not like, our biggest dog is maybe 20 pounds and he's a dachshund. And we have 3 little old ladies, and we have Laverne and Shirley. They came out of, like a puppy mill situation. And we've had them for maybe 3 years, and they are 14. And then we have Cosmo, who is, he's a dachshund as well, and he came from a local shelter, and he's our young buck. He is actually 8 or 9 years old right now. So we didn't get him as so old, but my daughter fell in love with him, and so did I. So that's how we got him. And then this past May, we took in Myra, and she is a rat terrier. She is 13. A woman out of Chicago who does rescue and foster. She is an angel on earth. She had Myra because Myra was rescued directly from a puppy mill while she was pregnant. So Cheryl helped with the babies, and the puppies were all adopted out. And then Myra did not have a home. And I first thought she said Myra was 3. And then when she wrote, no, she's 13, I was like, well, she's ours, because I look at this dog in her eyes, and I see some other dogs that I've had. And Myra has been, so our other dogs, they were all in shells. And, it takes love and time and just understanding, and patience for them to come out of their shells. Myra is still, we've had her late April, early May. She still won't let us pet her. That's not comfortable to her. She will let me pick her up. She loves walking. I just learned this week she loves to be squirted with the hose outside. And now we have like this big game in the backyard. We've never had water dogs, so it was really funny to discover like, oh my gosh, she loves the hose. But so those, and she's super wild because she's never been in a house before. Like it's funny to watch her navigate the hardwoods and that. She's doing really well. But she's coming out and we see things like the puppyhood she's never had. Like she's silly and she loves to run and that just there's so much. Like I have never experienced as much joy when you take in like this really old dog, and they look terrible when you get them because they come from such horrible places. They've had bad nutrition. But then to like see a dog who's in a field for the first time, like running in a field for the first time, or like in the forest on sniffing leaves and digging in the dirt and the joy, it's so contagious. Like mine are gonna totally bark here right now. It just, I don't know what it is. There's no greater joy than watching that. It completely fills my heart. So,
I think your life purpose is to bring people joy.
Oh, that's sweet. I really love to bring people joy.
I really do.
And I like to feel joy. Like, and it's selfish too. Like, I love to feel joy. So, yeah. But yeah, I think like we take my grandma's in a nursing home down the street. So we take the dogs to the nursing home and it brings them joy and it brings the dogs joy. And, I don't want to say simple act because I know there's like so much work with dogs, but yet it very much, I work in a school and we say like, yeah, bucket filler, like fill your bucket.
Yes.
It means fill your heart with good feelings. And so like these dogs completely fill my bucket. And, being a mom and, the mom of a large family completely fills my bucket. I think where the dogs came from is that, we have 5 kids in a 7-year age span. So it's as crazy as it was when they were little, it went by really fast. And for a long time, I really thought I wanted a 6th. One more. Let's get one girl. Let's find one girl, Cliff. One more girl. Come on. And he was like, oh, I don't know. It's just a lot, right? And the older they get, the busier they get. And then what I realized is I didn't necessarily want another baby. I just really wanted to do my kids over again because I wasn't ready for it to go by so fast. Mm. And so he said to me, well, how about another dog?
Keep having dogs. No more kids.
Yes. And that's when we found Laverne and Shirley. Then we found 2 dogs. And he was like, well, that wasn't what I was thinking of. But by then my daughters were on board and he was suckered into it. But, so yeah. So I think that's where it kind of all feeds into itself. Mm-hmm. I just have always felt a strong need to be, like, I find great joy and satisfaction in, like, being a helper and being connected. When I was growing up, my dad was an attorney and he was in family law. And he was basically a divorce attorney, which is pretty much like the worst job ever because all you do is mediate and litigate like some of the worst fights of people's lives because kids are involved and money's involved and that. But one thing I had learned about my dad, it was actually after he died, but my dad didn't charge people to do adoptions because he so believed in the power of love and families and doing good. that way. And I think I was raised with that. Like I saw my parents as helpers, and I always felt good helping. I'm an introvert, so I'm a homebody. And, after my dad died, I felt and I went to college far away, and I felt disconnected from my family, and I was very alone. I felt very lonely and alone. And so, when I had Hattie, and there was just so much joy and love and connection, it was like I had that connection, and then I just kept yearning for that. And then, I think the adoption came out of that. And then, now the dogs are kind of fulfilling that. I work in a school, an elementary school. I'm a school secretary. Mm-hmm. And so like the best part of my job is I get to connect with the kids and have fun with the kids and bring joy to the kids. Yeah. So it's, I love that vibe.
That's
and
amazing.
That energy.
Let's talk about, I'm looking at the time, like it's flying by.
I know, I'm sorry.
No.
And I'm such a gabber.
No, I'm
that Midwestern thing.
I did. Bobby's mom, it's reliving my childhood cartoons all over again. No, it's so interesting. And I could literally talk for hours and hours and hours about, just connection. Like I love learning about stories, right? Like people's stories and what got them to where they are. But one part of your story that nobody would ever assume is sobriety. I mean, we could talk about lots of things, but I really want to talk about this. This is a conscious choice that I made this year just for health reasons. And it's like, it just wasn't serving me, but you did it for other reasons. So I'm really curious if you'd like to share that.
So I'm thrilled to share about it because I think it is such an unaddressed issue in our society. And the more I share about it, I'm no longer surprised by the emails or private messages I get from people like, can you talk to me a little about this? Or I kind of think about this, and just so you know, I think it's neat. And so it's that perception of what, we're fearful of what others think of us. Mm-hmm. And then when we find out what they think of us, it's, those two don't connect. So, so I'll go back, and this starts with your podcast. So not this summer, but the summer before, I found your podcast at the very beginning of summer. And I was having a hard summer because we were getting ready for that firstborn of mine, who I had all those years ago on my own, to go off to college. And I was really struggling with that. And I found your podcast, and I started listening to it, and like right away, everything you said, I was like, yes, 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 yes. And you often have the message on your podcast, what you resist persists. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because every single time I thought, what am I resisting in my life? The very first thing that would come to my mind, and like the thing I had the biggest like emotional and physical reaction to, was I need to give up alcohol. I need to get rid of it completely. And then I quickly shut the door on that thought because it was so uncomfortable. Some background on my drinking. People are still shocked when they find out that like I'm sober and I don't drink. And it's because I felt like I had a very negative relationship with alcohol. I was never a blackout drinker. I was never a partier. I mean, in college, I, partied and whatnot. But I mean, as an adult and in motherhood, I was never a blackout drinker. I was never a partier, but I certainly completely bought into and supported the whole mommy juice wine party meme thing. Like I was a walking meme there. And it's so accepted. Mm-hmm. And there's wine everywhere, and you can't go to your neighbor's house without getting offered a glass of wine. And so, I was certainly living out of alignment with many, many things in my life at this point in time. And I was also dealing with I had a lot of past trauma issues come up and past abandonment issues come up that were being triggered by my daughter going to college, which completely blindsided me. I was so uncomfortable with those feelings. I have 5 teens, and that's super, and I work, and so that's stressful in and of itself. So I would have a glass of wine every evening, sometimes 2. And it did become 2. And I would, I would drink so that I would feel like that happy buzzed feeling. And then I'd get really tired and sleepy and just feel kind of zen. And then I would just zonk out and go to bed early by 9:30. And then I'd wake up dehydrated with a headache, exhausted, because I have a very sensitive body and a very sensitive system. And so, but yet it wasn't bad enough where I thought, oh, I'm never going to have wine again. But it became a habit, where every night I would think about okay, what time can I have that glass of wine? Oh, I'm cooking dinner now and it's not quite 5, but now I'm going to have a glass of wine at dinner. And then now we're dealing with homework stress. Well, I'll just pour another glass of wine because it makes me smile and feel good and happy. And so then I hit a point where I was like, this isn't healthy. I'm gaining weight. I don't feel good. So you start to try to regulate your drinking. And you say, I'm only going to drink Fridays and Saturdays. Well, that doesn't work. and I have to say, if you have to regulate your drinking and give yourself days only where you can drink, to me, that is an indication of it probably is playing too big. For me, that was a huge indication to me, okay, this is clearly too big of a role in my life if now I'm trying to negotiate with myself how and when I can drink. And so, but it wouldn't be Friday and Saturday, because then we would go somewhere to dinner on Sunday and have a drink. And then Tuesday would be happy hour after work or someone's retirement party or a birthday party. And then you'd have a glass of wine or 2 there. And it was just, and then the next thing you know, you're drinking 5 to 7 nights again. And I knew I had to give it up. And I was so resistant to it. And because I love the taste of red wine. I couldn't imagine not having that. It seemed so forever. And I ended up finding, I started doing some Google searches about sobriety, and that AA didn't appeal to me at all. We actually had one on campus where I was working at the time, and it was all men who went. And so I'm well, I'm not comfortable with that. That doesn't feel right to me. And I found the Home podcast, and Holly Glenn Whitaker and Laura McKeon are 2 women in their 30s and 40s who are sober and who have, Holly runs the Hip Sobriety School and has a blog called Hip Sobriety. So I spent several weeks just reading everything she put out there. And I had so many light bulb moments reading it and realizing it. And then, but again, what resists persists. And I was still drinking wine at that time, a glass every evening, 2 glasses some evenings. And I just knew that this is what has to go. And I hit a point after Thanksgiving where I was sick for 3 weeks, and I felt horrible. And yet here I am still drinking wine in the evening with a cold. And I just thought, this is so, what am I doing? I can't even control my thinking with this anymore. And I knew I had to go completely. I knew I had to give up cold turkey because I couldn't moderate it. That wasn't for me. I couldn't negotiate with it. That wasn't for me. So in December, I think it was December 17th last year, I completely went cold turkey on alcohol. I did the Hip Sobriety School, which is an 8-week online program, which is phenomenal. And it made me realize that I had no self-care in my life. I wasn't taking care of myself at all. And when you stop drinking, you have to start coping with your problems because you have a lot of time on your hands. Mentally, you're mentally astute. and you're cognizant and you know what you're avoiding and you know it's uncomfortable and what you're avoiding. And that HIT Sobriety School and all the tools that Holly taught gave me like this toolbox of personal growth and development. And it like, that was like the match being lit. And then it just lit me on fire. And so like I found yoga and meditation and like I just kept I kept taking care of myself, and every week I was feeling better and I was thinking more clearly and I was feeling better about myself. And then because it's hard at first. And then I was starting to feel empowered, and I was starting to feel strong. And I was still listening to your podcast, and you were talking about the mastery program. And last summer when I was listening to it, I was like, wow, those women must be really amazing. I certainly am not one of them. Like, I certainly don't have, like, I don't know what I want in my life. And, like the clarity I found and the time I spent in meditation, taking care of myself in my early sobriety months, that made me realize, like, here I am in this amazing time of transition. I have 5 teenagers. We sent our first to college. And, it's not that you see like the light at the end of the tunnel, because my goal is to, like, I love having a close-knit tribe with my family, but I could see where there was going to be a change and a transition in my life as our kids aged up and out of the house.
Right.
And I realized I have no idea what I want to do. And whereas before, that would leave me feeling almost despondent and anxiety filled, I was like, but I can do anything. How am I going to figure this out? And I knew you were the person, because I'd been listening to you. And I'm like, okay, now I get this. Like, now I believe in myself and I trust myself enough where I can do anything. Like, I've always been able to do anything. Like, when I think back about all the things I did on my own, like, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
But yet we beat ourselves up and we see, I don't know why, but I could never see what other people saw in me so often. And I could never see my potential. And I was always beating myself up. And for me, I think that's a generational curse. I think that's so deeply, and it's actually something I'm working on with Reiki right now. I think that's just so deeply embedded in my genes. And I'm determined to break that. But
I was going to say, I think it's beautiful. I mean, just how you continuously show up. And I always talk about the breadcrumbs, right? It's like, okay, I'm listening to this podcast. Oh, I'm going to take this course. Oh, I'm going to do that. I mean, I remember when we first chatted and you were just running with it. I'm like, what do you need from me? You're like, Heather, this is exactly what I needed. And you really take ownership for what you want. But I think it's interesting. I mean, you definitely have to feel the discomfort before the healing happens. And I find that with a lot of people, once we start pulling back the vices, whether it's booze or technology or TV or, even me, I'm like, I'm like 1 coffee a day. And then I'm like, well, why did I slip in a second one? Like, just observing these little tiny things. When we take it away, even something as simple as a second coffee, we're like, what are we trying to hide? Like, what are we trying to cover up here? And it's so easy for us as humans to not, like, to see how easy it is to slip back into that and observe it. So
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I so agree. But once you can start doing that and you start consistent, like, it's just like the breadcrumbs, you follow them, but there's also, I forgot the word.
Momentum?
Like bank interest. Yeah. It's momentum, but it's like it compounds, like compound interest, where it grows exponentially.
Yeah.
What I find too, like, every time I face the discomfort and I go into there and I dig through it and I peel back a layer, like, my energy it like compounds, it grows exponentially. And I wasn't expecting that. And that is like, I just like, it's contagious. Like you're almost contagious to yourself. Like it's almost like you're desiring like, okay, what else do I need to strip off next? What else can I dig into? As uncomfortable as it is, because every time you remove that layer, like it's such a huge, it takes so much weight off of you. Mm-hmm. And when that weight is released, the energy that flows in after, and it takes a while. Like it's not instantaneous. But that energy that comes in and flows in is amazing.
I love it, Sarah.
It's kind of addicting. I think.
Yes. And I'm like, oh, that's a perfect place to round it out. But people don't know it until they experience it, right? They're like,
exactly.
Well, what's going to happen? What is this process going to do? And I'm like, I understand you're trusting some random stranger that you listen to on a podcast. And, I understand I'm very vulnerable and out there. But it is this evolution of trust and listening to yourself. But if I had to give any advice or like that, what's the magic secret? I'm like, whatever terrifies you, run towards that. On the other side of that is abundance, like is the freedom that you're craving. Like you are terrified to quit drinking, run towards that. You want to write a book and you don't think you're good enough. Hence, that's my shit. Run towards it. And the explosion of freedom is on the other side. So
exactly.
And you just keep doing that. And you're like, Heather, I have more energy than I've ever had. And I'm like, great. Keep going, right? Your kids are I can see you like running a marathon with your kids and you're like, come on, keep up to mom. And they're like, Mom, we can't. You're like, oh my God, this overabundance of life. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. I know we could have got deeper into this about community and oh my God. And, raising your family and what that's like for your children, having diversity and all of that. And I'm sure we'll have another conversation about it. But I just wanted to say thank you for being you.
Oh, thank you for all that you do and your voice that you put out there, but also like all the other voices that you give that, you help them find the strength that they need to put their voices out there too. It's such an awesome ripple effect.
It is. Thank you, Sarah.
It is so cool. Thank you, Heather.
All right, ladies. So there you have it. That is Sarah Cruz and her amazing story. We would love to know what you thought. If you have any personal messages you would like to send to Sarah, just based on, if you connected to her message and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so connected to my story. I really feel called and connected. How many times am I going to say that word? Send us an email, support@heatherchauvin.com, and we will personally respond and say, we got it, and we're forwarding it to Sarah. So thank you so much for listening today. Again, if you are feeling called and connected, I'm now hosting a time and energy intensive. So if you've been listening to me for a while and, you've heard me talk about the Moms in Control Mastery Program, and maybe you're just not ready to dive into the 8-month commitment, I'm going to be teaching you my energetic time management philosophy. I'm going to save you money. I'm going to save you time. I'm going to save you energy. And, sometimes we get into these things and we're like, this isn't what I wanted. So I decided to create this on an application so that I can personally read and respond to your application. So you can ask me questions and be like, hey, is this a right fit? These are my goals. This is what I'm after. And I will definitely let you know. So check that out at heatherchauvin.com/intensive. All the investment information, everything is on that page. So just do it. Take action. heatherchauvin.com/intensive. All right, guys, talk soon.